while I'm waiting for people to check in and say hi, I'm going to start a little bit by talking about the topic. We are all hijacked into believing that we can do multiple things simultaneously. But our brains are not really fooled by this. While we might seem to be overactivated and addicted to the constant stimulation of phones and helping kids with homework and cooking dinner and all of that, actually, what happens in our brains in terms of the connections and the processes in our brains is that our brains get exhausted between the different types of between the pressure to switch from one thing to another so quickly, and it increases our susceptibility, this type of exhaustion, to illnesses, accidents, and inattentiveness. Now, multitasking doesn't really exist in the brain. And the myth that we can do multiple things simultaneously well is just untrue. Multitasking, especially when it involves technology, slows productivity, changes how we absorb information, and can increase superficiality in relationships. So let me check in with you all right now. And I have a little something that I prepared for you. I'm just looking for it now about why multitasking is a myth. So let me put that in the chat right now so you get this. Um, Here you go. This is a gift for you from me. I hope you'll find it helpful. So let me let's see. Okay. Let Hi Sylvia from Chicago. Hi friend. Is it French or Villefranche from France? Let's see. Hi Renee from Chicago. Hi Susie from Belfast, Northern Ireland. Welcome again. Hi Susan. Glad you're folding your laundry while you're watching this. There you go. Hi Corey from Virginia. Listening in for your daughter, who is unfortunately still at work. She has ADHD and sensory issues. She's in college and working a part-time job while living at home. Hi Robin, you're from Florida. Great. Hi Monica from Port Huron, Michigan, and Dorothy from Cyprus. Welcome back. Hi, Margie Kierstead from Western Mass. Up, you're my neighbor. Hi, Susie from Budapest. Great to have you back. Hi, Laura from Austin. Hi, Kevin. Hello to all. Okay, so it's actually Claire from France. Oh, okay. Thank you, Claire. That makes sense. I couldn't tell if Villefranche is what that is, but thank you. Hi, Catherine from Jeddah. Great to see you. Great to have everybody today. So let's go back to the idea of multitasking. So when we multitask, what happens is that we are simply splitting our attention. Every time we switch from one thing to another, we're not really concentrating on either task. And everybody needs a mental warm up to resume the suspended task. Dr. Daniel Goleman wrote in his book Focus that it can take anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes to regain full focus from these regular disruptions. Efficiency goes down, productivity decreases, and you're likely to get less done in all areas and probably feel more depleted too. In fact, a recent study in the journal Nature found that heavier media multitasking is associated with a higher tendency to have attention lapses and forget things. Let me say that again. Heavier media multitasking is associated with a higher tendency to have attention lapses and forget things. Wow. So for adults with ADHD who already struggle with working memory or processing speed issues, media multitasking can have serious, if not dire, consequences. So let's greet the people who've just recently joined. Reggie from Portugal, welcome. Deloy from Memphis, nice to see you. Renee, you always try to be an octopus with multitasking. Hi, Matthias, I think, from Brazil, and hi, Jennifer. Nice to have you back. So one of the things that we're struggling with, I think, is that media multitasking is considered part of the new normal today. It's no longer thought of as being rude to turn our attention away from someone with whom we're talking, okay, to respond to our cell phone. So it's normal if you're having a conversation with someone and you get a ping that there's a text. It's normal to respond to that. It used to be when cell phones just came out that people were just like, that was rude, like to stop your conversation and pay attention to your cell phone. And that's not the case anymore. So this activation, this what happens is that we have these novelty detectors in our brains that get activated each time these things ping. And this activation occurs in the dopamine pathways of the brain, which manage pleasure, attention, and addiction. And these pings are delivering messages to us that we want to hear, but they pull on our attention and also can become addicting for us. ADHD brains, already taxed by executive functioning challenges and prone to seeking out high dopamine activities, are biologically primed for this increased adrenaline and cortisol that these notifications deliver. Does this mean you shouldn't listen to music while you work on a project, or a podcast while you're folding your laundry, or rely on brown noise to soothe that buzzing in your head that keep so you can be more focused? No, that is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the process of switching back and forth from tab to tab, from device to device, from one sensory overload to another. It's these patterns that overwhelm our brains, but particularly brains that are neurodivergent. So we have a couple of comments here. Sylvia says, so if you like to listen to podcasts while you do the household tasks, you are media multitasking? No, no, that's not what I'm talking about. Listening to podcasts while you're doing household tasks, listening to music while you're cooking, that actually kind of can help you motivate and can take up some of that sort of space in the brain, the zzz, and you'll be able to you'll be able to listen and do your task. That makes sense. Robert says, hi, I was multitasking with YouTube while trying to remember which platform this webinar was on. Surprised at myself for actually finding it. Well, welcome, Robert. We're glad you're here. So what can we do about this unhealthy trend that promotes disconnection from ourselves and from each other? So I'd like to hear from you first. What kind of multitasking, media multitasking, do you find yourself doing? And how does it work for you to carry out tasks when you're, going from tab to tab, or when you're going from your phone to your screen and back to your phone? Or you're watching TV and you're doing something on your computer simultaneously. What is your concentration like? What is your ability to actually get things done, work? So let's answer a couple of those questions. So what's it like for you when you're multitasking? What types of multitasking do you do? And how effective do you think you are at either task when you're multitasking? So I'm looking forward to seeing some responses to those three questions, which are a lot of questions. So one of the things that we want to do to reduce multitasking is to opt for single tasking as often as possible. And I want to tell you, I personally struggle with this. Just like you, I've got a lot to do each day, and it's easier if I talk on the phone when I walk my dog or create a presentation while checking my email every hour so it doesn't accumulate. That's one of my pet peeves when my email gets over a certain number. But what happens when I do that is I'm actually shredding my attention because I'm not really present for for either task. So I'm not fully focused on my presentation because I'm like checking to see if my email is accumulating. Or when I'm walking my dog, I'm not really enjoying the process of being outside or listening to music or podcasts. So I'm in the experience, because when you're talking to someone, it's a different kind of attention and engagement than when you're listening to something. Um, when we do that kind of multitasking, our stress increases. So when you're trying to talk on the phone and make dinner and keep an eye out on your kids, your stress level is going to go up, because it's just enough to cook dinner and keep an eye on your kids, rather than add in the phone call in the same way. Sometimes it just feels like a bad habit that I need to stop, but I just can't because I feel this sort of internal pressure to get things done. So let's see some answers to my questions. So Caroline said, I end up wanting to give up and I end up increasing my to-do list. So when you're doing multitasking, you want to give up. Nadine, I just can't do that. I went through menopause, so my brain is mush. Actually, there's some research about how that estrogen modulates a couple of neurotransmitters that are really important for memory, for dopamine, and for serotonin. So for memory, for sort of motivation, and for mood. Jennifer, listening to conference calls while doing email or work, I can't retain both at all. I can only focus on one thing. I realized a few minutes later that I didn't hear anything at all in the conference call. Right. Now, some people can knit and listen to a conference call. Some people can doodle and listen to a conference call. But if you're doing email, which requires a kind of thinking and responding, you actually are not going to be able to pay attention to the other thing in the way that you need to. Um, Nukuma says, listening while. Sylvia says, I hate going through my emails, especially because I have so many spam ones to manage. So I will watch a YouTube channel show to make this less doable and half watch, half listen. But I find it takes a really long time to get through the emails. And I often have to rewind the video multiple times because I can't get through either. Right. It might be better just to use, the Pomodoro method and set your timer for 20 minutes and bang through 20 minutes worth and then have a reward for yourself. Break it up that way. Joni Rapp, stress. Yeah. Monica, I will sometimes watch 80s and 90s sitcoms when I'm doing laundry, cooking, or cleaning the kitchen. I like the idea of being transported to a simpler time and disassociate from the boredom of the task. Well, that's interesting. Are you able to complete the task while you're dissociating from the boredom of it and watching the shows? I'm curious about that. Jamie, just got on. Hi. I've heard at times staying on task and stress has played a huge role in my decreased productivity. Of course, because media multitasking does decrease your productivity because you can't focus on one thing fully. And the shifting back and forth that we're demanding of our brains is not the 10 to 15 minutes that Dr. Daniel Goleman was talking about at all. Joni, I look back at my life only realizing how ADHD affected it. Took me until age 70. Well, good for you for realizing. Susan, seems like when my kids were little, multitasking was constant. Yes, but when your kids were little and you were multitasking, were you also talking on the phone? Were you also answering texts? Were you trying to respond to Instagram alerts? Probably not. You were just dealing with your kids, and that was enough. But now we've added this extra layer. And what I'm trying to say is if we solo tasked, like, okay, I'm just going to focus on my kids and not pay attention to my phone, that's enough multitasking for the brain. When we add the technology in, it adds another layer of stress. Yes, Jamie. Reggie, usually I have an immense need to do several things at the same time. Even in my relaxing moments, for instance, watching TV is impossible to do it. Alone, I have to be doing something, one or two more things. And yes, I doodle all the time. I'm on a phone call or video conference. It's the only way I'm able not to be bored. And that's actually, a common compensatory thing for lots of people with ADHD, doodling or maybe having a fidget ball, or one of my friends actually can knit in a conference call because she keeps it underneath the table. I can't do that because I have to look at my knitting, so that would be tough. But if I'm just listening to something, I can certainly knit, but not when I'm expected to show my face, pay attention, and respond. Monica says yes. Okay, let's see. Yep, says Joni. Okay. Dorothy, let's see. Monica says yes. Joni, I hate too many emails too. Sitcoms here and films. Yep. Dorothy, I don't know if it's the right time to say this. It's like watching a bird doing its own thing at the same time, knowing that the bird is myself. Sometimes I watch the watcher. The bottom line is that I feel sleepy when I find myself in that position. Okay, thank you. Joni, I switch channels a lot even when chilling with TV. Okay. So there's a need that I'm hearing from people to have different types of stimulation simultaneously. Zuzi, I muted all notifications on my phone because I can't focus with them on. I only allow calls, text, and email. It works pretty well so far. Right. So you've limited the input, and that seems to work. And congratulations, Susan, on folding your laundry. Okay. So interestingly, I think that you may or may not be able to eliminate your media multitasking habits, but if you could even make one small change, I think you'll find a change in your ability to perform better and feel less stressed. So let's go over a couple of suggestions of how you can make this change. So the first thing is to make a conscious effort to do one thing at a time. And for some people, it might be two. Um, so you're listening to me and you're folding laundry because if you were just listening to me, you would be too distracted and maybe tempted to do something else. That's okay. You know what your limit is, but you're not listening to me folding laundry and also trying to respond to your emails. That would be too much. So this means noticing when you are feeling overwhelmed or overloaded and when you're multitasking and pausing to stop engaging in one of the activities. Just last week, I saw someone talking on his cell phone while he was biking. Ew. Examples might be no texting while driving. In fact, almost 9% of all fatalities are linked to distracted driving. Or no phones during family meals. How about using the time when you're doing chores or helping your kids with homework to connect with each other and take a little phone break? It's not easy to do, but the payoffs will be increased sanity and calm for you and for them and for your household. And by the way, listening to music or while doing something or listening to a podcast or me talk, interestingly enough, doesn't seem to be included in the multitasking information overload processes I read about for this blog. So I see that a couple of you can do two things simultaneously, but if you do three or four, then you shut down. So now you've just identified your own limit. And this is really important. So I can walk the dog and listen to a podcast, but when I walk the dog and I talk to someone on the phone, that actually might be too much. Okay. So it's good to understand that I can do one, I can try for one thing, but really I like to do two things because that is kind of helps me feel balanced. And here are the two things that I can actually shift between and not feel like I'm stressed out. So the second thing is to turn off your cell phone when you're working. So it's one thing to listen to music or go for a run while you're listening to music. It's something else to receive texts or social media notifications throughout a work period. Your concentration will be constantly disrupted, and the quality of your work will suffer. Your productivity will go down. So if you're worried about missing an emergency, then set a timer to check your phone at regular intervals. It's the ping, 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 which activates your stress response, throws off your focus, and increases your distractibility and vulnerability for other interruptions. Instead, use a timer for whatever break you need between your work periods to mark the beginning and the end of the work period, and then maybe to do the same thing, usually often, to check your texts or whatever you want to check, social media. That's a reward for completing your work period. Um, so how do you do one thing when there are so many thoughts? So thank you for saying that, Claire. Could you explain what you mean? So I think what you're talking about is like your mind is kind of racing and you have to do this and this and this and this. And so we want to try to do in advance is to either write things down to have a list so we understand what they are, or um, or I just got distracted because I got a ping on my watch. Um, hold on a second. I'm sorry. So I apologize. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. I got a ping on my watch, and uh, I have to respond to this. um, uh, because after this is over, I'm a part of a panel at an ADHD summit. So I'm really looking forward to that. But I can't do that and this. And so you can see this is exactly what happens probably to all of you. So I think this is a good real-time example of multitasking and how it doesn't work. Thank you for your patience. So when there are many things to do at the same time, what happens is that you feel overwhelmed. And just like what happened to me just now, there's a kind of panic sensation, like, oh, I got to respond to this because I actually did, and and then I start thinking about, oh, what is this person going to say or do, and I just go down this distracted lane, which keeps me away from being present with you. So when there are a lot of thoughts that are happening simultaneously, what helps is to write things down. What are some tasks that I want to do, and then like focus on that one and use something to fill up the void of those thoughts, whether that's music or a podcast or something where you can still stay focused. I recently wrote a blog for my website on brown noise, the value of brown noise. So I would encourage you to check that out. Irene, I find that doing the same thing over and over again instead of doing 1,000 things at the same time pretty hectic. It took a fair while to calm things down a little bit. And Caroline says, as technology and social media demands increased over the years, I began to shut down because I knew I didn't cope well with all the notifications and communications. That's right. I found my friendships depleted and I was criticized for not getting back to people quick enough now that I have a healthier balance and try to encourage friends just to call me. Um, I wonder if this, Reggie says, I wonder if this need to multitask has something to do with the highs and lows, the mood swings of ADHD. I'm not sure. Will this be available? Yes. Hi, Joni. At least I'm watching and listening now, but I am tempted to start prepping dinner at the same time, though not even ready for a meal. Right. Something to do to keep that part of your brain that wants to wander busy. Um, Lindy, I love that you demonstrated being distracted. We get it. Thank you, Caroline. Don't worry. I like listening to instrumental music, no lyrics or words. I have reams of paper notes to try and organize each day. Right. So sometimes paper notes are not the best thing for you. And what might help is to put it in your calendar and send an alert instead. Um, Stephen, outside my window here, nothing but sirens and beeping. I live in a high crime area and I'm a peaceful person, 73-year-old artist, musician, and ex hippie. I'm tired of living in paranoia while walking around in Chicago. I have ADHD and PTSD. I'm sorry, Stephen, that your home environment is so stressful for you. That sounds really tough. And I hope that you maybe can find a different place to live that it feels more nurturing to you. Dorothy, the funny thing is that I always have a to-do list and I never write it as a daily routine. I have plenty to do notebooks. Zuzi, same. Any lyrics and I'm too distracted. Right. And so that sort of speaks to that article that was in the New York Times a while ago, which I cited in my on my website about the importance of brown noise or white noise or something that can fill up a part of your brain that needs something to kind of grab onto while you're doing something else. Um, Kevin, too many things at the same time. When I make a mistake, I can bring bad feelings or a bit of self-loathing. Joni, I do the alerts too. Ha, I put them in to repeat every hour. Okay, great. So let's go on to the third tip for today, which is to close all unnecessary tabs and create separate browsers. This is a hard one for many folks with ADHD. One idea can lead to another, and then suddenly you might have 30 or more tabs open. Let me ask you a question. Do you feel more or less stressed when you look at the top of your screen and see all of those tabs? For me, it increases my anxiety because now I'm looking at a large array of things that I really should pay attention to. Ask yourself, how many open tabs can you really handle without feeling overwhelmed? So I'm going to ask you this question. How many open tabs can you really handle without feeling overwhelmed? Please put that in the chat. Maybe once or twice a day, try to reduce your tabs to that number. If you are worried that you will forget something that is important if the tab is closed, add it to the bookmarked folder. Then you can return to it later. Similarly, divide your interests into two browsers. Separating home and work stuff can really lower your multitasking tendencies. When you're at work, close the other browser, opening it maybe only during breaks with a timer to limit yourself. Remember, your goal is increased productivity, not going down rabbit holes. So let's say how many tabs? Joni says 2 to 3. Um, Lisa says, I'm afraid to close them. I have 23 open now, but you have a history that can get you back there. Caroline says, seeing the tabs helps remind me that I need to go back and finish something I didn't do. So the visualization is good. Okay, as long as it's not overwhelming. Lindy, is there any paper planner you can recommend? No, not particularly. Sorry. Colleen, my job requires at least 5 programs open at once. It's hard. Wow, that does sound tough. Kashi, they truly don't bother me. I love lots of tabs, especially things I need for instruction for work. Kashi, that's what you said. Lindy helps me remember. Joni, I try for 2 or 3, but often have more. So you just want to know, I think for yourself, like what works for you and what your limits are, because we want to work within your limits rather than adding on to things which will increase your stress. So the fourth tip is to engage in conversations when you are not distracted by your phone. It doesn't really feel good to anybody to have someone turn their attention away from a conversation to a buzzing phone while you are in the middle of saying something that you think is valuable. It might be the custom now, but each time you do it, what you're signaling to the person is that your phone is more important. And this is especially true when parents turn away from their children to their own phones. It may look like multitasking, but it's really more like dismissing. You're turning away from your loved one towards the digital universe. I struggle with this, me, as a parent, and also as what I know what it feels like as a child. You know, when I visit my aging father who lives several hours away and he's playing around with his iPad while he's talking to me, I feel hurt. Didn't I just travel all the way here to see you? Doesn't does this happen to you and your family or your job? How would single tasking, paying attention to the conversation at hand, affect your participation and affect change your relationships with others? So I'm curious for you. You know How often do you find that you're engaged in conversations where it's just the conversation and the phone is off? That's really important to check out with yourself. How often do you think you do that? Um, what do you think the responses from your kids when you turn to your phone? How do you feel when they turn to their phone instead of responding directly to you? I'm going to put in again my downloadable about the topic for today, and I'm waiting for some answers to that question. Joni, you said I get it. Anybody else? Anyone else feel like when, have an experience when you're talking to someone and they are responding to their phone that somehow you feel unimportant or dismissed? It's a hard thing to change in our culture, but doing that, because what happens is if you're in a conversation and you get a buzz on your phone, then when you come back to the conversation, 9 times out of 10, you don't remember what you were talking about or what you were saying. Susan, what a world we have. On Sunday, my phone mostly stays on the shelf. It's more peaceful. Kashi, I really need to work on this. My teenage daughter calls me out on it regularly. Well, thank you very much for your sharing. I actually am going to stop in a minute. Sherry, I feel it. But unfortunately, with all the things beeping at me, I'm that person. Margie, I'm having trouble typing things while trying to listen to you. Okay. Um, let's see. Zuzi, absolutely. I think it's rude. Alicia, I find this ironic. I find, well, let's see. Alicia, I find this ironic. This topic is being discussed the week they limited my daughter's Chromebook to 9 tabs with the school. She's constantly flipping from one to the other, even with me keeping an eye on her and reminding her to stay on task. They have closed over 100 tabs before they quit counting. I hope this tab limit will help her stay less distracted. Me too. Dorothy, you prefer right contacts. I feel dismissed. I feel unimportant, but I just think of a friend who has 3 children, so I try to understand she's busy. That's fair. Louise, thanks for pointing this out. I realized I did this yesterday when talking with my son. Liza, I have to work hard at not picking up the phone when talking to my boyfriend. Laura, I don't necessarily take it personally. It really depends on the nature of the conversation. I get it. I'm probably guilty of it. My life is too busy. Colleen, my brother and friend are obsessed with this and it feels terrible, but I know I do it too. Lindy, I've had boyfriends complain that I trail off in a conversation to look at a phone. It's been a huge problem I'm trying to fix. Eye contact is very important for me, says Dorothy. We should set good examples for our kids. Sherry, my fiance, is very frustrated that I'm always on multiple tabs, a phone and table all at the same time. Joni, are you here every Friday? I'm here certain Fridays of the month. I'll be here in a few weeks because next week I'll be at the International ADHD Conference, which will be online, and I encourage you to join us. It's a great conference, and there'll be lots of sessions that will give you a ton of information about living well with ADHD. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciated our conversation, and I will see you very soon. Thank you.